Okay. President Biden is scheduled to make remarks on the Omicron variant. It will come as millions of Americans are preparing for holiday travel and family gatherings. He'll talk on Tuesday about the number of COVID cases that have been on the rise and how this is going to impact all of our celebrations as we head towards Christmas. Joining us right now, Niall Stanage, White House columnist for The Hill. Niall, good morning to you. Merry Christmas.
And to you.
Okay, so here's the deal. This seems like a really difficult task that the president has. On the one hand, we're hearing that for the majority, if not all, of Omicron cases, there are very mild symptoms, especially among those vaccinated. And very many people are vaccinated right now. But then on the other hand, Dr. Anthony Fauci came out this weekend talking about a dire rise in the number of hospitalizations, even deaths, as a result of Omicron. So what is the president to do when the messaging seems so conflicted right now and he wants to do the best thing for the country? What is he going to say tomorrow?
It's a great question, and it's probably the most important question he faces. And I think he has to address two audiences in one speech, and that's where the difficulty lies. On the one hand, Adrienne, he is obviously trying to provide reassurance for people who are vaccinated and boosted, because, as you say, the consequences for them appear to be quite minor. And yet he's also trying to, in a sense, instill fear, perhaps well-founded fear, in those who are not vaccinated at all, for whom there is real danger because this variant appears to be so enormously transmissible.
Right, and we still don't know. We don't know if those who are unvaccinated will face the same kind of diagnoses that we saw so many innocents face in 2020 during the peak of this terrible pandemic. Now, President Biden has addressed COVID before many times. He's been very firm on the fact that he's not going to shut down the nation again. Thankfully, many people would, be hurt economically, as well as just the fact that this has been the COVID fatigue has continued, as we've seen. But is there anything that he can say? You said he might be using fear, but then on the other hand, he has to assuage fear. So how does he do that?
Well, I think there are a couple of ways. One is to talk about the fact that even if you don't suffer fatal or lethal consequences from this, there are real concerns about the hospital system and pressures being placed upon it. Even if Omicron is milder, some people are probably going to end up hospitalized. And if we end up, as the experts suggest, with 1 million people a day perhaps getting infected, obviously that can have ramifications. Yet, at the same time, to your point, the president doesn't want to be suggesting a return to lockdowns. And it is worth stressing, Adrienne, we're not really in the same situation as we were in March 2020. I hear that phrase a lot, but that's just not true, given the widespread vaccines that are available, the availability of home testing, and so on and so forth.
Who in the world is saying that? Where are you hearing that a lot from, that we are somehow back to March of 2020? Who is saying that to you?
I think I'm hearing that from other broadcasters who are much less reasonable than you, Adrienne.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. I was like, it wasn't here. On Sunday, two very high-profile Democratic senators, Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, they both announced they tested positive. Both are vaccinated, so these are breakthrough tests, which we've seen time and time again. And they have mild symptoms, and they're very thankful for that. But will the timing of their diagnosis impact the president's push for more Americans to get vaccinated? Because I think there are a lot of people who are still on the fence about being vaccinated, but they keep on seeing these breakthrough cases.
Yeah, and it's a great point. Obviously we wish Senators Warren and Booker well. I'm not sure how much their cases play into President Biden's announcement, but I do think there is a point about high-profile cases having a public impact. One thing, we were just talking about March 2020, one thing that did happen then, you may remember, was Tom Hanks and his wife being afflicted by COVID, and that at the time really did seem to break through into public consciousness. So whether it's Senators Warren and Booker or perhaps more high-profile people still to come, it does have an impact, I think, on the public's awareness.
One more question very quickly, and my producer just told me you're out of time, but let's squeeze this one in. Should the president, in Washington, is there talk about the president getting rid of the term booster and instead calling it a third dose of the vaccine to perhaps give more serious to this? Or is the term booster making it easier for people to swallow?
At least one Democratic governor has suggested abandoning that phrase booster and making 3 doses the new fully vaccinated. That will be one of the key things to watch in the president's remarks.
All right. I know that there was a Colorado official who also happened to mention this. Niall Stanage, as always, so good to be with you. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to click on the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.